So I want you to picture this scenario for a second. You're sitting on your couch.
Right.
You've had a really long, just exhausting day. The kind of day where your brain feels like, I don't know, like television static.
Oh, yeah, we all know that feeling.
Yeah. And you open a bag of potato chips, and you make this very conscious, totally rational deal with yourself. You literally say, I am just going to have a handful.
Just to taste, to take the edge off.
Exactly. But then, like 20 minutes later, you're just sitting there staring into the shiny, foil-lined abyss of a completely empty bag.
It's a universal experience.
It really is. And your fingers are coated in that fine layer of that fluorescent orange salt. And you're hit with this intense, heavy wave of confusion.
Followed immediately by the guilt.
Right. The guilt sets in instantly. You look at the crumpled bag and you just think, what just happened? Like, why did I do that?
It's so common, but we frame it completely wrong.
Well, here's the critical question I want you, the listener, to really ask yourself right now. Why does this never, ever happen with an apple?
That is the perfect question.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever sat down in front of the television, started mindlessly snacking, and suddenly looked down in sheer horror at a pile of 6 apple cores on your coffee table?
No. I mean, the biology of your body simply wouldn't allow it.
It never happens. Yet the immediate reaction we have to the empty bag of chips, the narrative we aggressively tell ourselves, is always framed as this, like, profound personal failing.
We internalize it so deeply.
You really do. We tell ourselves, I have absolutely no willpower. I am weak. I just lack basic self-control. But today, for this deep dive, we're going to systematically tear that narrative apart.
We really are.
Because that empty bag of chips sitting on your couch, that is not a failure of your willpower. It is the wildly successful result of explicit, highly sophisticated engineering by teams of scientists and food technologists.
That's the fundamental paradigm shift we are exploring today. I mean, this isn't about shifting blame to some vague corporate boogeyman, right?
No, not at all.
And it's definitely not some fringe conspiracy theory. We are talking about straightforward, heavily funded, incredibly precise product engineering.
Literally down to the molecular level.
Exactly. These items are designed so that you physically cannot stop consuming them. Overeating isn't an accidental byproduct of a tasty snack. It is the primary defining design goal of the product.
So our mission for this deep dive is to take you behind the curtain of that industry. We're pulling from a really comprehensive guide on nutritional literacy today, zooming in specifically on Chapter 18.
Which is just a fascinating section of the source text.
It's mind-blowing. It lays bare exactly how the food industry operates, their financial incentives, their laboratory techniques, and really the hidden science of manufacturing desire.
And we should probably clarify right up front that the goal of digesting all this material is not to leave you terrified of your local supermarket.
Right, we don't want to cause a panic attack in the cereal aisle.
Exactly. The source text makes a really profound point early on. It says, true nutritional literacy should provide you with security and autonomy. It should not generate anxiety.
That's such an important distinction.
If learning about food makes you panicked or makes you feel like every single meal is a landmine, then the information is basically being weaponized against you.
Yeah, it's doing the exact opposite of what it should.
Right. Information, when it's properly contextualized, should actually liberate you from that cycle of confusion and guilt.
Which means we are going to give you X-ray vision today. We're going to map out the exact systems that create this food environment.
So you can finally see the matrix, basically.
Basically. By the time we're done, you aren't going to feel guilty about that empty bag of chips anymore. You're going to feel informed, and you're going to understand exactly how the trick is played.
But to really grasp why you can't put the chips down, we actually have to take a really bizarre historical detour.
Oh, yeah. This part is wild.
We have to rewind all the way back to the 1970s and look at the United States military.
Which I know sounds like a total non sequitur.
It really does. But the modern architecture of your snack cravings was essentially born out of a massive logistical crisis within the U.S. Army.
Okay, so set the scene for us. What exactly was happening in the 70s?
Well, the Army was facing a significant physiological problem with their troops in the field. They were issuing these field rations, the predecessors to modern MREs, meals ready to eat.
Right.
And from a purely nutritional standpoint, these rations were perfectly fine. I mean, they contained all the necessary calories, the proteins, fats, vitamins, everything required to keep a soldier energized and combat ready.
But the soldiers were actively refusing to eat them, right?
Exactly. They just wouldn't eat them.
Which is a catastrophic problem for a military force. I mean, if your infantry isn't consuming calories, their cognitive function drops, their physical endurance just plummets, and your entire operational readiness basically falls apart.
It's a huge vulnerability. And the refusal wasn't driven by a lack of hunger. When you're humping an 80-pound pack across rough terrain all day, you are burning thousands of calories. You are biologically starving.
So why wouldn't they eat?
Because the food provided was so monotonous, so profoundly unappealing on a sensory level, that soldiers were experiencing what the military actually termed menu fatigue.
Menu fatigue.
Yeah, they would literally rather endure the severe physical pain of intense hunger than force another bite of this bland utilitarian paste down their throats.
Wow. So the military realizes that, like, mathematically perfect nutrition doesn't matter at all if the human brain rejects the sensory experience of actually eating it.
Precisely. They needed a way to compel a human being to eat, even when the food itself was completely uninspiring.
They needed to hack the desire to eat.
That was the mandate. How do you engineer irresistible appeal into a shelf-stable block of calories? And to solve this, the Army brought in an outside specialist, a man named Howard Moskowitz.
Howard Moskowitz. A name that, for all intents and purposes, fundamentally altered the trajectory of the modern human diet.
He really did.
So what was his background? What kind of scientist was he?
Moskowitz was a psychophysicist, which is a highly specialized, absolutely fascinating field.
I honestly hadn't really heard of it before reading the source text.
Most people haven't. Psychophysics is basically the quantitative study of the relationship between physical stimuli and the psychological sensations and perceptions they produce.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener. What does a psychophysicist actually do in a laboratory setting?
Essentially, they measure the subjective human experience. So in the context of food, a psychophysicist maps how the exact chemical composition of a substance that's the physical input translates into a psychological experience of pleasure or indifference or disgust in the human brain.
Okay, got it.
So Moskowitz was given this monumental task by the Army to find the optimal, undeniable formula to make rations palatable. And his methodology started with something remarkably simple.
What was it?
Just adding sugar to coffee.
Which seems almost too basic, right? I mean, I think the common sense assumption most people would make is a linear relationship. Like, if I like sugar in my coffee, then adding more sugar will make me like it more.
Right, like a straight line pointing upward on a graph. More physical input equals more psychological pleasure.
Exactly.
That was the prevailing assumption at the time, but Moskowitz's rigorous testing completely shattered that idea. He set up these vast, highly controlled taste tests where subjects were given coffee with steadily increasing, mathematically precise concentrations of sugar.
That would happen.
Well, when he plotted their reported pleasure levels on a graph, the result was not a straight line ascending into infinity. It formed a distinct, unmistakable bell curve.
Oh, interesting. So the pleasure increases as the sugar increases, but only up to a certain point.
Exactly.
And then it plateaus, and if you keep adding sugar, the pleasure actually falls off a cliff.
It completely plummets because at the very top of that bell curve is a mathematically precise peak. At this exact concentration, the sensory pleasure is maximized.
It hits the sweet spot.
Yeah, literally. It isn't too bitter, but crucially, it isn't cloying or overwhelmingly sweet either. If you push just slightly past that peak, the sensory receptors are overwhelmed, the brain registers it as sickeningly rich, and the desire to consume completely vanishes.
And Moskowitz actually coined a term for the very top of that bell curve, didn't he? A phrase that has become sort of a dark legend in the food industry.
He did. He called it the bliss point.
The bliss point.
Yeah. Our source text actually translates this beautifully into a phrase that means the point of ecstasy.
Wow.
It is the exact microscopic intersection of ingredients that maximizes sensory pleasure and simultaneously maximizes the compulsive desire to continue eating.
I mean, it sounds poetic, the point of ecstasy, but it's really just a cold, calculated coordinate on a psychophysicist's graph.
That's exactly what it is. And the military research obviously didn't stop at just sugar in coffee.
No, the coffee was just the proof of concept, right?
Right. Moskowitz took this bliss point methodology and began systematically applying it to other fundamental taste drivers, specifically salt and fat. Okay.
But the true scientific breakthrough, the discovery that really changed everything, wasn't mapping the bliss point for a single ingredient in isolation. It was discovering that you could map the bliss points of combinations.
Oh, the golden trifecta. Salt, sugar, and fat.
Exactly. When you combine salt, sugar, and fat in highly specific, carefully calibrated proportions, you don't just add their individual pleasures together. You multiply them.
It's exponential.
Yes, you create a complex sensory profile that almost never occurs in the natural world. I mean, think about it. A piece of fruit has sugar, but no salt or fat.
Right.
A piece of meat has fat, but no sugar. By combining all three at their respective bliss points, Moskowitz created a physiological experience that the human brain categorizes as an absolute jackpot.
Let's talk about what happens in the brain when you hit that jackpot, because we hear a lot about dopamine in pop science, usually in relation to like smartphones or gambling.
Our social media algorithms.
Yeah. How does this specific combination of ingredients hack that dopamine system? Well, the dopamine reward circuit, specifically involving areas like the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, it's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
It kept us alive.
Exactly. For millions of years, human beings lived in environments where calories were incredibly scarce. Finding a dense source of energy like a honeycomb or a fatty animal was a rare, life-saving event.
So when you found it, your brain wanted to make sure you remembered it.
Yes. When our ancestors ate those foods, the brain released a massive surge of dopamine. And dopamine is not just the pleasure chemical, it is the learning and motivation chemical.
Okay, so it's a teacher.
It tells the brain, whatever you just did to get this food, remember exactly how you did it and do it again as soon as possible.
So it's a profound behavioral reinforcement mechanism.
Precisely. But Moskowitz's engineered combinations of salt, sugar, and fat at the bliss point, they trigger a dopamine release with an intensity that whole natural foods simply cannot match.
It just overloads the system.
It supercharges the circuit, the brain lights up like a pinball machine and just demands more, completely overriding any rational thought. It is the exact same neural circuitry, the same biological hardware that is hijacked by highly addictive narcotics.
Okay, I want to push back on this for just a second. I'm trying to view this through a skeptical lens, right?
Sure.
Because human beings have been combining salt, sugar, and fat for centuries. I mean, think about traditional baking. A classic French croissant is literally a masterclass in butter, which is fat, combined with refined carbohydrates and sugar with a pinch of salt.
It absolutely is.
Pastry chefs have been doing this for hundreds of years. So how is an army psychophysicist doing anything fundamentally different than, like, a baker in Paris in the 1800s?
It is an excellent question.
Yeah.
And the difference really lies in the precision and the intent.
Okay.
A French baker is engaged in a culinary art. They are making something delicious, absolutely. But Moskowitz was engaged in molecular engineering. A baker relies on tradition and intuition, and the resulting food, while very rich, still triggers natural satiety signals eventually. I mean, you can only eat so many croissants before you just feel physically ill.
True, you hit a wall.
But Moskowitz was using massive data sets and clinical trials to find the microscopic mathematical point where the dopamine surge is completely divorced from satiety.
So it's the difference between someone playing a beautifully loud chord on a piano and an engineer finding the exact microscopic acoustic frequency required to shatter a crystal wine glass.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
The baker is playing the piano. The food scientists are tuning a digital frequency generator to just shatter our biological self-control.
Yes. They found the resonant frequency of human craving. Now, initially, this groundbreaking research was classified. The military obviously viewed this data as a strategic asset.
Sure, they didn't want their adversaries reverse engineering irresistible field rations.
Exactly. But as we know, science rarely stays contained. A few years later, Moskowitz transitioned out of the military sphere and took his proprietary methodology straight into the commercial sector.
And that transition is the pivot point, where this story turns from a fascinating scientific endeavor into a massive public health crisis.
It really is. He brought this military-grade psychophysics to the absolute titans of the food industry. We're talking about multinational corporations, PepsiCo, Campbell's, Oscar Mayer, Kraft.
The giants.
They hired him to apply the bliss point math to their consumer product lines.
And here is where the motivation fundamentally fractures. Because the military, for all its intense methodology, ultimately had a goal rooted in nutrition and survival.
Right. They needed the soldiers to consume the rations so they would have the baseline calories to function and stay alive.
But when Moskowitz sits down in a boardroom at Pepsi or Kraft, that goal just evaporates.
The mandate completely inverted. It shifted from make food that nourishes to make a product that is impossible to stop consuming. In the commercial sector, the objective is not sustenance, and it is certainly not public health. The sole overriding objective is pure, unadulterated consumption volume.
They took a behavioral tool designed to prevent soldiers from starving and repurposed it to make the general public overconsume on a massive scale.
It is a stunning shift in ethics.
It really is. And the source text points out that once this scientific methodology took root within these corporations, it didn't just remain a laboratory technique. It metastasized.
Yes, it created an entirely new corporate culture dedicated to the engineering of desire.
So to understand the internal culture, our text relies really heavily on the investigative journalism of Michael Moss.
Yes, his work is incredible.
In 2013, Moss published a truly landmark book titled Salt, Sugar, Fat: How the Food Giants Hooked Us. And Moss didn't just analyze the chemical makeup of the snacks on the shelf.
No, he went much deeper.
He spent 4 years infiltrating the companies themselves. He secured access to internal memos, confidential documents, and he recorded extensive interviews with the actual food scientists, the marketing directors, and the top-level executives at the world's largest food corporations.
And what Moss uncovered in those interviews wasn't just a collection of secret recipes. He uncovered an entire proprietary vocabulary.
It's a secret language.
A highly specific internal language used in these corporate boardrooms that reveals, with chilling clarity, how they view the consumer and what these products are explicitly designed to do.
It is basically a lexicon of behavioral manipulation. The text highlights 3 distinct terms from Moss's research that are used internally as the ultimate metrics for a product's success. Let's break those down.
Sure. So the first term is craveability.
Craveability. Let's dig into what that actually means in a corporate context.
Well, craveability goes far beyond the normal human experience of appetite. It's not the mild passing thought of, oh, I'm a bit hungry, maybe I will have an apple. Craveability is an engineered psychological hook. It is an active, intrusive, almost compulsive desire for a highly specific product. The executives actually measure craveability by how often a consumer's mind involuntarily returns to the memory of that snack throughout the day.
That's terrifying. It's the colonization of your attention.
Yes.
They want the thought of their product to literally interrupt your workflow. So it's not just about satisfying hunger. It's about inducing a mild obsession.
Exactly. And then the second term on their metric sheet is snackability.
Snackability.
What does that one mean? Snackability is fundamentally about the elimination of friction. A product with high snackability is designed to ensure that absolutely nothing stands between the initial impulse to eat and the physical act of eating.
Okay, so no prep time.
It means the product requires zero preparation. No cooking, no heating, no utensils, not even a plate.
It's the ultimate decoupling of food from the dining table.
Exactly. You can eat it with one hand while driving a car. You can eat it while walking down the street. And most importantly, you can eat it mindlessly while sitting on the couch, completely absorbed in a screen.
They want the physical mechanics of eating to be so effortless that consumption just becomes a subconscious background activity.
They're trying to bypass the conscious brain entirely. I mean, if you have to chop vegetables or even use a fork, you are aware that you are eating.
Right, there's a physical awareness.
But if you are just moving your hand from a bag to your mouth while watching a movie, the conscious brain is completely offline.
And then we get to the third term, which honestly sounds like a concept from a dystopian science fiction novel.
It really does.
More dourishness.
And the source text actually explicitly notes that there isn't even a neat direct translation for this in other languages because the concept was so specifically and intentionally coined in English by these corporate engineers. Yeah, more-ishness is arguably the most insidious property of all 3. It is the engineered characteristic of a food that forces you to want more of it, even after you have just eaten a substantial quantity.
Which goes against everything we know about normal biology.
Completely. Think about how normal biology functions with whole foods. You're hungry, you take a bite of chicken or broccoli, and with every subsequent bite, your hunger decreases incrementally until you reach a point of satisfaction and you naturally stop.
The biological graph goes down.
Right, but moorishness completely inverts that biological graph. With a highly moorish product, the first bite does not diminish your appetite, it actively ignites it.
Oh.
The act of eating the food increases your profound desire to keep eating the food. The product does not provide satisfaction. Its explicit chemical purpose is to generate craving.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate again here.
Go for it.
Because if I'm listening to this, a part of my brain is saying, hold on a minute. Aren't these just standard, everyday business terms dressed up to sound scary?
I hear that a lot.
Right. Like, if I develop a software application, I want it to have an intuitive, frictionless user interface that's just snackability for software.
Sure.
If I write a thriller novel, I want the end of every chapter to be a cliffhanger. So you keep reading. That's more ishness. Every single company on Earth wants consumers to like and obsess over their product. Is this food engineering really that sinister, or is it just, good capitalism?
It is a very valid counterargument, and frankly, it's the exact public relations defense the food industry relies on when they're criticized. They claim they're simply giving consumers what they want.
Right.
But what makes this uniquely dangerous, and what separates an ultra-processed food executive from a novelist writing a cliffhanger, is what is conspicuously absent from their list of priorities.
Let's get what's missing.
When a product development team at a massive food corporation sits down to formulate a new snack, their explicit, documented criteria for success are the cost of raw materials, the projected profit margins, and these three psychological hooks: craveability, snackability, and more-ishness. Do you know what never appears on the whiteboard?
The nutritional impact on the human body.
It is entirely absent from the calculus. A product that achieves off-the-charts metrics in craveability and more-ishness is greenlit and celebrated as a massive financial victory, completely regardless of the fact that it might be biologically disastrous for the consumer.
The health consequences are just treated as a completely irrelevant externality.
Exactly. And if anyone needs proof of how acutely aware these executives are of the biological hacks they're deploying, Michael Moss's investigation uncovered a detail that is just staggering in its hypocrisy.
This part is unbelievable. It's the ultimate tell.
It really is. During his years of interviews, Moss discovered that the very executives, food scientists, and flavor engineers who sit in these boardrooms and meticulously calibrate the bliss points of these snacks, they frequently refuse to consume the products themselves.
They literally won't touch their own life's work.
The people who know exactly which chemical compounds are being used to synthesize more-ishness, the people who review the psychophysics data, they tend to maintain diets that look vastly different from the target demographic they are aggressively marketing to.
So what do they eat?
They eat whole foods. They avoid the center aisles of the supermarket entirely.
It reminds me of the classic Silicon Valley tech CEO who invents a wildly addictive, algorithmically driven social media platform, but then goes home and absolutely forbids their own children from owning a smartphone or having a tablet.
Yes, it's the exact same dynamic.
They know exactly what the code is designed to do to the human dopamine system, and they absolutely refuse to expose their own families to that vulnerability.
They understand that willpower is useless against a perfectly engineered system, so they simply opt out of the system entirely, while profiting massively from those who remain trapped inside it.
Which brings us to the most crucial mechanical question of this deep dive.
Okay.
We've established that the food is explicitly designed to make us overconsume. We understand the corporate vocabulary and the dopamine hacking, but how, on a purely physiological level, are they actually pulling this off?
Right. How does it work inside the body?
Yeah, how exactly does a cheese puff or a processed cookie override the human body's natural stop signals? Because from an evolutionary standpoint, we have survived for millions of years, precisely because we know when we are full, we have an incredibly robust biological braking system.
We do. The human body possesses a highly complex, beautifully elegant signaling system dedicated entirely to satiety. And to truly understand how ultra-processed foods sabotage this system, we first need to clearly understand how the system is supposed to function under normal conditions with real food.
Right. Let's return to your earlier example of the apple.
Okay. Let's trace the biological journey of an apple through the human body. When you sit down and eat a whole apple, you initiate a sequence of events that unfold over time. The first step is purely mechanical. Physical volume.
Okay, volume.
The sheer physical bulk of the apple, the water, the flesh, travels down your esophagus and enters your stomach. As it fills the space, it physically stretches the muscular walls of your stomach.
And the stomach has sensors to detect that stretching, right?
Yes, they're called mechanoreceptors, or stretch receptors. When the stomach wall expands, these receptors fire and send a mechanical signal straight up the vagus nerve to the brainstem, essentially communicating, hey, there is physical mass occupying this space.
Step 1, mechanical stretching. Got it. So what happens next?
Step 2 involves the architecture of the food itself, fiber. An apple is packed with dietary fiber, which forms this complex fibrous matrix. This matrix acts as a physical barrier in the digestive tract.
And that's important. Why?
Because it significantly slows down the entire process of digestion and absorption. It controls the release of energy. The natural sugars present in the apple are trapped within that fiber matrix.
Okay, so they can't just flood the system all at once.
Exactly. As the stomach slowly breaks it down, the sugar is released into your bloodstream as a steady, manageable trickle. You don't get a massive spike in blood glucose, you get a sustained, gentle wave of energy.
So we have physical stretching and slow, controlled absorption. What about the chemical side of things, like the hormones?
That is step 3, and it is just a masterpiece of biological communication. As the food moves from the stomach into the small intestine, a massive cascade of hormonal signals is triggered.
What kind of hormones?
Well, you have a decrease in ghrelin, which is the primary hormone that makes you feel the sensation of hunger. It drops. Simultaneously, your fat cells release leptin, which communicates to the brain that your long-term energy stores are adequate.
And there are short-term hormones released by the gut during the meal itself, right? Things we're hearing a lot about lately in the news.
Yes. Crucially, your gastrointestinal tract releases a cocktail of specialized peptide hormones. You have cholecystokinin, or CCK, you have peptide YY, and you have GLP-1.
GLP-1.
Right, glucagon-like peptide 1, which is the exact hormonal pathway that modern weight loss drugs like Ozempic target.
Oh, okay.
These chemical messengers are secreted into the bloodstream, they travel up to the hypothalamus in the brain, and they explicitly deliver the message. We have received sufficient caloric energy. The nutrient requirements are met. You must cease the behavior of eating.
It is a profound biological symphony.
Yeah.
You have the mechanoreceptors providing the percussion, the fiber conducting the tempo, and this entire choir of hormones singing in harmony to tell the brain, put the apple down, we're done.
It is an incredibly effective system, but ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, are weaponized specifically to silence every single section of that symphony.
And the text breaks down 4 specific, highly engineered strategies that the industry uses to systematically dismantle your biological braking system.
Yes. Let's analyze these 4 strategies deeply, because this is where the X-ray vision really starts to develop for the listener.
Okay, the first strategy the text outlines is extreme caloric density with low volume.
This is a direct assault on the stretch receptors in your stomach. Let's look back at that standard 150-gram bag of potato chips you were holding on the couch.
Okay.
That bag contains roughly 780 kilocalories. For an average adult, that is more than a third of their entire daily caloric requirement, all packed into one snack.
But 150 grams of thin, dehydrated, airy potato chips takes up almost zero physical space. I mean, if you crush that bag down, it's just a tiny handful of dense matter.
Exactly. And that is the hack. It delivers a massive, overwhelming payload of energy, almost 800 calories. But the physical volume of the food is so small and easily compacted that it never stretches the stomach walls enough to reach the activation threshold of those mechanoreceptors.
So the vagus nerve never fires. The mechanical I'm full signal is completely bypassed because the stomach doesn't physically realize it has just ingested a third of a day's energy.
Right. It is basically caloric stealth. Which brings us to the second strategy, which builds directly on this, the total elimination of fiber.
Because if you look at the nutritional label of almost any highly processed snack or fast food item, the fiber content is usually 0 or like incredibly close to it. Why do they deliberately strip it out?
Well, remember, fiber is the brake pedal of the digestive system. It slows things down. And from a manufacturing standpoint, fiber introduces texture issues, it reduces shelf life, and it makes the product feel heavier.
It gets in the way of snackability.
Precisely. So industrial processing refines the raw ingredients until the fiber is completely destroyed or removed.
And when you eat a carbohydrate that has been stripped of its fiber matrix, what happens in the gut?
It is like dropping pure sugar directly onto an open flame. Without the fiber to slow down digestion, the highly refined starches and sugars hit your stomach and are almost instantaneously converted into glucose and absorbed straight into the bloodstream.
So instead of a gentle wave of energy, you get a violent spike.
A massive spike,
Right.
which triggers a massive insulin release to pull the sugar out of your blood, which inevitably leads to a huge crash that makes you feel exhausted and ravenously hungry again an hour later.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, and furthermore, because the stomach empties so incredibly fast, the food does not linger in the gastrointestinal tract long enough to trigger the release of those crucial satiety hormones we talked about, like peptide YY and GLP-1.
You are free-falling without a parachute. The volume is too low to stretch the stomach, and the absorption is too fast to trigger the hormone.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the third strategy, and this one touches on evolutionary biology in a really fascinating way. Bypassing sensory-specific satiety.
So, sensory-specific satiety is a deeply ingrained biological phenomenon. It is an evolutionary adaptation designed to ensure humans consume a wide variety of nutrients. It essentially means that your brain gets bored of specific flavors.
Okay, give us an example of how that works in normal everyday life.
Imagine you sit down and try to eat a massive family-sized bowl of plain, unseasoned, boiled potatoes.
Sounds awful.
Right. Even if you are incredibly hungry when you start, and even before your stomach is physically stretched to its limit, you will eventually reach a point where you simply cannot force yourself to take another bite of plain potato.
You just hit a wall with that specific food.
Your brain registers the repetitive sensory input and says, okay, we have extracted all the nutritional value we need from this specific flavor profile. I am turning off the desire for it.
But crucially, you might still be hungry for something else. I mean, it's the classic room for dessert phenomenon.
Okay.
You are absolutely sick of the savory roast chicken and potatoes, but the moment someone brings out a sweet chocolate cake, suddenly your appetite is miraculously renewed.
Yes. The brain desires novelty to ensure a broad spectrum of micronutrients. Natural whole foods generally possess relatively simple, straightforward flavor profiles.
Yeah.
An apple tastes like an apple. A carrot tastes like a carrot.
Right.
So sensory-specific satiety kicks in fairly quickly to stop you from gorging on just one thing. But ultra-processed foods are explicitly engineered to short-circuit this boredom mechanism.
They use complex, constantly shifting flavor profiles. The text calls this out specifically.
Think about the architecture of a highly engineered flavored tortilla chip, like a Dorito.
Okay.
When you put it in your mouth, you don't experience a single flavor. You experience a sequenced carousel of sensory inputs.
Like a progression of tastes.
Exactly. First, you get the immediate sharp hit of the surface salt. A millisecond later, the rich, coating mouthfeel of the fat hits your tongue. Then you get a powerful savory umami kick from flavor enhancers like monosodium glutamate.
Right, MSG.
Then there might be a subtle hint of dairy, followed by a lingering spice note on the back of the throat.
And even the texture is designed to change rapidly, right? Like it starts with a loud, violent crunch and immediately dissolves into a paste.
Precisely. It is sensory overload. Before your brain has a chance to get bored of the salt, the umami hits. Before you can habituate to the umami, the spice distracts you.
That's wild.
The flavor profile is so chaotic and multi-layered that the brain cannot categorize it to trigger sensory-specific satiety. You never get bored, so you never stop.
It's brilliant in the most devious way imaginable. And that perfectly sets up the fourth and final strategy, which is perhaps the most mechanically effective of all of them. Accelerated consumption speed, or what the industry very frankly refers to as oral melt.
So think about eating natural foods, a piece of steak, a raw carrot, a handful of almonds. They require physical work. You have to actively chew them.
You have to process them yourself.
Right. The simple act of prolonged mastication, the physical effort of your jaw muscles, the time it takes to break the food down into a swallowable bolus that serves as an early warning system for the brain. The longer you chew, the more satiety signals begin to warm up and get ready.
But ultra-processed snacks are formulated to bypass the teeth as much as physically possible.
They are engineered to practically disintegrate the moment they make contact with human saliva.
Oral melt. I mean, it is the perfect description for those cheese puffs that you put on your tongue and they just vanish into thin air.
Yeah.
You barely bite down and they are gone.
Yes. By maximizing oral melt, the food scientists minimize the required chewing time to almost zero. This accelerates the sheer speed at which you can funnel calories down your throat to a highly unnatural rate.
And why is that speed so important to them?
Because your body has a built-in physiological lag time.
A delay.
Yes. From the moment food hits your stomach and enters your small intestine, it takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes for that complex cascade of hormonal satiety signals, the CCK, the GLP-1, to be secreted, travel through the bloodstream, reach the hypothalamus in the brain, and fully activate the sensation of being full.
Okay, so you have a 15-minute biological blind spot where your brain doesn't actually know what you're doing to your stomach.
Exactly.
I used the acoustic frequency analogy earlier, but we need a different one for this. It's like, okay, imagine you're trying to rob a highly secure bank.
Okay, I'm with you.
The bank has a state-of-the-art alarm system, but there is a flaw in the software. When a door is breached, it takes the computer exactly 15 minutes to process the breach and sound the sirens.
That is exactly what is happening in your body.
Right. If the bank robbers are slow, the alarm catches them. But if they are incredibly fast, if they have engineered a way to sprint into the vault, grab the cash, and sprint out in under 14 minutes, they can completely empty the vault before the security system even boots up.
And oral melt is the sprint, because the food dissolves instantly, because there is no volume to trigger the stretch receptors, and because the complex flavors keep you engaged, you can rapidly consume hundreds, potentially thousands of calories within that 15 to 20-minute blind spot.
You're just shoving calories past the sensors.
By the time the 20 minutes have passed and your brain finally receives the hormonal message screaming, "Stop, we have massively overdosed on energy," the bag of chips is already empty. The robbery is complete.
That is staggering. We are up against an engineered system that systematically turns off our mechanical stretch receptors, strips away our digestive brake pedal, confuses our evolutionary taste buds, and literally races past our hormonal warning lights. It is a flawless biological hack.
It is a closed loop of manipulation, which means that if we are going to defend ourselves, we need to be incredibly precise about what we are actually fighting.
Right.
We keep using this blanket term, ultra-processed food. But what does that term actually mean on a scientific level? Because I think a lot of people just assume processed means junk food or, anything in a shiny wrapper with a lot of sugar in it.
Right. Or they think like a slice of cheese is processed, so what's the difference? And for a very long time, the nutritional science community lacked a rigorous, standardized way to define what made this modern food so uniquely dangerous.
For decades, nutrition science was trapped in a paradigm of reductionism. We categorized food entirely by its macro and micronutrients. We looked at a food and asked, how much saturated fat does it have? How many carbohydrates? How much vitamin C?
That's the back-of-the-box mentality.
Exactly. But that framework completely fails to capture the reality of the modern food supply. Looking only at nutrients misses the forest for the trees. Because the real issue driving the obesity and metabolic crisis wasn't merely the presence of sugar or fat. It was the intense industrial violence being done to the food before it ever reached a human mouth. And to truly understand this, we have to look at the Novier classification system.
Novier. This was a massive seismic paradigm shift in how we talk about food.
It changed everything. The Novier system was developed in 2009 by a brilliant Brazilian epidemiologist named Carlos Monteiro and his research team at the University of São Paulo.
And what did Monteiro propose?
He looked at all the data and realized that focusing on nutrients was a dead end. He proposed a radical new system. Let's categorize food based not on what nutrients it contains, but on the degree, extent, and purpose of the industrial processing it has undergone.
Okay, let's walk the listener through the 4 Novier groups in detail, because understanding these categories is really the absolute master key to unlocking nutritional autonomy in the grocery store. Let's start with Group 1.
Group 1 encompasses minimally processed or unprocessed foods. This is the foundational bedrock of all traditional human diets across the globe. We are talking about whole fruits, raw vegetables, fresh cuts of meat, fish, eggs, whole milk, dry legumes, nuts, whole grains.
Basically, the stuff that is readily identifiable. It looks like it came from a plant or an animal.
Yes. Now, these foods might have undergone some basic physical processing. They might have been cleaned, dried, roasted, frozen for preservation, pasteurized, or fermented.
There's nothing crazy.
Right. Their fundamental physical matrix and nutritional nature haven't been substantially altered. Nothing artificial has been added to them. They are quite simply real food.
Okay, Group 2.
Group 2 is processed culinary ingredients. These are substances that are extracted, pressed, or refined directly from Group 1 foods or from nature, and they are used in kitchens to prepare, season, and cook other foods. Think of sea salt, olive oil pressed from olives, butter churned from milk, cane sugar, or milled flour.
Right. You don't sit down and eat a bowl of flour with a spoon or drink a tall glass of olive oil. They are components used to make meals, not meals themselves.
Exactly. They are the tools of cooking. Then we move to Group 3, processed foods. These are relatively simple products made by combining whole foods from Group 1 with culinary ingredients from Group 2 to increase their durability or enhance their taste.
Give me some examples of Group 3.
Canned vegetables preserved in salted water. Simple artisan cheeses made with milk, salt, and rennet. Freshly baked artisanal bread made only with flour, water, salt, and yeast. Fruit preserved in syrup. Simple cured meats.
Okay, so it's a mix.
Yeah, they might use salt, sugar, or vinegar as a preservative, but if you look at the food, you can recognize exactly what it is, and if you look at the ingredient list, you recognize every single word. It is a slightly modified whole food.
Which brings me to a really crucial question, because I think this is where a lot of well-meaning people get tripped up by the terminology.
Okay, what's the scenario?
If it's a Sunday afternoon and I go into my kitchen and I take white flour, butter, eggs, and a massive amount of white sugar, and I bake a huge batch of homemade chocolate chip cookies, is that ultra-processed? Because it's packed with sugar and saturated fat, and it's definitely a cookie.
No, it is not ultra-processed, and this is the vital, liberating distinction of the Novier system. Your homemade cookies fall firmly into group 3. They are
But
processed.
not ultra-processed.
Exactly. Yes, they are a hypercaloric treat, and you probably shouldn't eat them for every meal, but you made them using basic, recognizable culinary ingredients. Your body knows exactly how to digest butter and flour. Group 4, however, ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, is an entirely different category of existence.
How does Carlos Montero strictly define Group 4?
The technical scientific definition of a UPF is an industrial formulation made mostly or entirely from substances derived from foods and chemical additives, with little to no intact whole food remaining in the final product.
So it's not actually food at all. It is an edible formulation.
Exactly. Montero famously describes them as laboratory creations designed to mimic food. They are meticulously engineered to function like food in terms of palatability, appearance, and massive shelf life. But they are not food in terms of how the human biological system interacts with them. The ingredients used to construct a Group 4 product are not things you have sitting in your kitchen pantry.
I mean, I'm looking at the list of common UPF ingredients from the text right now, and it legitimately reads like an industrial chemistry supply catalog, not a grandmother's recipe book.
Read a few of them off.
Hydrolyzed vegetable protein, modified cornstarch, sodium caseinate, maltodextrin, high fructose corn syrup, emulsifiers like mono and diglycerides, thickeners like xanthan gum, synthetic antioxidants like BHT, artificial colors, flavor enhancers like monosodium glutamate E621.
Not a single one of those is a culinary ingredient you could buy in a normal market. They are industrial extracts and synthetic chemicals.
Yeah, you don't keep a jar of sodium caseinate next to the salt shaker?
Exactly. Take maltodextrin, for example. It's a highly processed carbohydrate derived from starch that acts as a filler and spikes your blood sugar faster than pure table sugar. Or emulsifiers.
What do emulsifiers actually do? Because I see them on every label.
Emulsifiers are chemicals that force water and oil, which naturally repel each other, to bind together. The industry uses them to create an incredibly smooth, unnatural mouthfeel and to keep products from separating on a shelf for 2 years.
But are they safe?
Well, recent gastroenterology studies suggest these same emulsifiers might actually degrade the protective mucosal lining of the human gut. The sole purpose of all these chemical additives is to intensify those sensory attributes we talked about earlier to maximize craveability, ensure oral melt, and construct the illusion of food.
So under Group 4, we are talking about almost the entire center aisles of the supermarket.
Pretty much.
Industrial pastries, bagged chips, mass-market sodas, brightly colored sugary breakfast cereals, commercial cookies in plastic trays, margarines loaded with stabilizers, artificially flavored fruit yogurts, frozen ready meals, industrial hot dogs, supermarket sandwich bread with 25 ingredients, and even things marketed as healthy, like energy bars and protein shakes.
Yes, all of it. And what made the Novier classification so incredibly powerful and why it really shook the foundations of the food industry is that epidemiological studies quickly proved that the degree of processing eating a high percentage of Group 4 foods predicted negative health outcomes, obesity, and metabolic syndrome far more accurately than traditional nutrient counting ever did.
And that realization sets the stage for what is arguably one of the most important scientific studies in modern nutritional history.
Absolutely. Because for decades, the food industry had relied on a brilliant, mathematically plausible defense strategy. They weaponized reductionism. They argued that a calorie is just a calorie.
Right. Their public relations argument was essentially, look, if our ultra-processed, frozen, chemically stabilized pizza has the exact same amount of fat, the exact same amount of carbohydrates, and the exact same amount of protein as a handmade pizza from a local Italian restaurant, it is the exact same thing to the human body.
It's just fuel, they'd say.
Right. If people are gaining weight and getting sick, it is solely because they lack willpower and are eating too many total calories. It is the consumer's fault, not our formulation.
And for a remarkably long time, the scientific community struggled to definitively, irrefutably prove them wrong. The problem lay in the nature of nutritional research itself. Almost all nutritional science is observational epidemiology.
Explain why observational studies leave so much room for doubt.
Well, in an observational study, scientists look at a massive population over many years. They might observe that the demographic eating the highest amount of ultra-processed foods also has the highest rates of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. They publish a paper showing the link.
Seems pretty straightforward.
But the food industry would instantly counter with the classic foundational caveat of statistics. Correlation does not equal causation.
Uh, the industry lawyers would say, sure, people eating lots of frozen pizza are heavier, but maybe those people also work two sedentary jobs, have less time to exercise, experience higher chronic stress, and get less sleep. You can't prove the chemical structure of the pizza caused the weight gain. It's just associated with a modern lifestyle.
Exactly. It's the confounding variable problem. To eliminate those confounding variables and prove absolute biological causation, you can't just observe people living their messy lives. You need to conduct a randomized controlled clinical trial.
Which is really hard to do with diets.
It's incredibly expensive and logistically nightmarish. You need to lock human beings in a room, control every single aspect of their environment, and dictate every single calorie they consume. But in 2019, a brilliant investigator at the National Institutes of Health in the United States, Kevin Hall, finally managed to do it.
I love this study so much. I was digging into the methodology of this NIH trial, and the design is just elegant. It is a absolute masterpiece of scientific rigor. I'll lay out the setup, and you tell us the results.
Go for it.
So Hall recruited 20 healthy adult volunteers. They had no underlying metabolic issues, no severe obesity, no special dietary restrictions, and he admitted them into a highly controlled clinical environment, a metabolic ward at the NIH facility.
Right.
They lived there, under 247 observation, for 4 straight weeks. For 2 of those weeks, the participants were fed a diet consisting almost entirely of ultra-processed foods, no VA Group 4, think industrial cereals, chicken nuggets, processed cheeses.
The standard American diet, basically.
Yeah. And for the other 2 weeks, they received a diet of minimally processed whole foods, no VA Groups 1 and 2, things like beef roasts, barley, fresh vegetables, salads.
And he randomized the order to prevent any chronological bias. Half the group started on the UPF diet, half started on the real food diet, and then they swapped.
Right. But here's the absolute genius of the study design, the detail that completely checkmated the food industry's defense. Hall and his team painstakingly, mathematically matched the nutritional profiles of the 2 diets.
This is the key.
A plate of the UPF food and a plate of the real food had the exact same amount of presented calories, the exact same total sugar, the exact same sodium, the exact same fat, and crucially, the exact same amount of fiber.
They matched the macros perfectly. If the a calorie is a calorie defense was true, both diets should have the exact same physiological effect.
Exactly. He eliminated the macro argument entirely. If the macros are mathematically identical, any difference in how the subjects behave or how their bodies react must be caused by the industrial processing itself. And the final, critical rule of the experiment. The participants were allowed to eat ad libitum.
Which means they were instructed to eat as much or as little as they naturally desired in both phases. Food was constantly available.
Okay, so the stage is set. Healthy people, perfectly matched nutrients, eat whatever you want. What was the result?
The result was a profound earthquake in the nutrition world. When the participants were on the ultra-processed diet, they spontaneously, unconsciously consumed an average of 508 extra kilocalories every single day compared to when they were eating the minimally processed diet.
Let me just pause and emphasize the sheer magnitude of that number. 508 calories. That is roughly equivalent to eating an entire extra fast food hamburger or an entire extra meal every single day. And they do this completely spontaneously.
Completely spontaneously. Nobody instructed them to eat more. The food wasn't placed closer to them. When surveyed, they didn't even report feeling significantly hungrier or noticing a difference in how full they felt.
They just didn't realize it.
They just mindlessly, effortlessly shoveled 500 more calories a day into their mouths simply because of the structural engineered nature of the group 4 food they were consuming.
And what did that 500 calorie surplus mean for their physical bodies over such a short period?
The physiological results were incredibly rapid. In just 2 weeks on the UPF diet, the participants gained an average of 0.9 kilograms, almost 2 pounds.
In 2 weeks?
Yes. And during their 2 weeks on the real food diet, eating ad libitum, they naturally and spontaneously lost an average of 0.9 kilograms.
That is the dagger. Even though the fiber, the sugar, and the fat were mathematically identical on paper, the industrial processing itself caused people to radically overeat and gain weight. The old, deeply ingrained rule that a calorie is just a calorie breaks down completely here.
Completely. The Kevin Hall trial was the definitive smoking gun. It proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the physical and chemical design of ultra-processed foods actively alters human appetite regulation independently of the macronutrients involved.
It's the structure.
Yes. The extreme caloric density, the oral melt, the hyperpalatability of the bliss point, these physical factors actively bypass our biological satiety mechanisms.
Which means that almost all the traditional moralizing advice we give people about weight and health is fundamentally flawed. Telling someone whose entire kitchen pantry is stocked with Novi Group 4 foods to just exercise more willpower, or watch their portion sizes, or eat less is absolutely useless advice.
It's worse than useless. It's cruel.
You are telling them to use their conscious mind to fight a perfectly engineered biochemical hack.
It is like throwing someone into a rapidly sinking boat with a massive hole in the hull and telling them, just swim less, you'll be fine. It completely ignores the reality of the physical environment they are trapped in.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of environments, the sophisticated engineering we are talking about does not stop at the molecular structure of the potato chip. It extends outward. The industry doesn't just engineer the food, they meticulously engineer the physical space you must enter to acquire that food.
Yes, the supermarket. We have to talk about the physical architecture of retail, because the source text makes it abundantly clear. The modern supermarket is not a neutral utilitarian space where you go to logically select provisions. It is a meticulously designed psychological battlefield.
Every single detail in a modern supermarket, from the exact tone of the lighting to the flooring material to the placement of the milk to the tempo of the music, is a calculated, highly researched decision designed with one overarching behavioral goal: to maximize your consumption, trigger impulse purchases, and extract maximum profit.
Let's break down the psychological architecture of the store step by step, because once you see these spatial tactics, you can literally never unsee them. Let's start with product placement on the shelves.
Shelf placement is arguably some of the most heavily monetized and aggressively negotiated real estate in the world. The foundational rule of retail psychology is that eye-level placement drives the highest volume of sales, simply because that is where human vision naturally, lazily rests. But products do not end up at eye level because they are the healthiest options or the most essential or the best value for the consumer.
No, they end up at eye level because the food manufacturer paid the supermarket a massive premium for that specific vertical coordinate.
Exactly. It's called a slotting fee or a slotting allowance. What you see immediately in front of your face is exactly what is most profitable for the manufacturer to sell you, not what is best for you to eat.
And this tactic becomes infinitely more insidious when you consider demographic targeting. Think about walking down the breakfast cereal aisle.
Oh, the cereal aisle is the most predatory zone in the store.
It really is.
Okay.
If you look at the placement, the healthy, high-fiber adult cereals, the bland bran flakes and plain oats are usually way up on the top shelf where an adult has to physically reach for them.
Yeah.
But the sugary, hyper-colored, ultra-processed cereals featuring big, smiling cartoon characters, they're almost never at adult eye level. They're placed significantly lower down, precisely aligned with the eye level of a 4-year-old child sitting in the seat of a shopping cart.
It is entirely intentional. The characters on the boxes are even illustrated so their eyes are looking slightly downward, establishing direct parasocial eye contact with the child.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly predatory.
Any parent who has ever navigated a supermarket with a toddler knows exactly what happens next. The child makes eye contact with the cartoon tiger, the desire is triggered, and the relentless begging begins. The supermarket is literally turning your own child into a highly effective, high-decibel marketing agent inside your cart.
It is psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Another prime piece of real estate are the end caps, the displays situated at the very ends of the aisles.
Yes. The end caps have the highest foot traffic visibility in the entire store because every single shopper is forced to walk past them to turn a corner and navigate the maze. They are practically unavoidable.
Right.
Retailers use them for massive, highly visible product displays. The psychological catch is that consumers subconsciously assume that if a product is featured on an end cap, it must be a special promotion or a great deal.
Like it's on sale.
Exactly. But in reality, they are rarely the best value. They are simply the high-margin, Group 4 products the manufacturer is pushing hardest that week.
So that covers shelf placement. What about the macro layout of the store itself? Because I have always wondered why, if I just want a carton of milk and some eggs, I have to walk a marathon to the deepest, darkest corner of the building.
The physical architecture of the shopper's journey is designed around a concept called forced exposure. Think about the absolute essentials that drive the vast majority of quick, everyday grocery trips. Milk, eggs, fresh bread, meat. These anchor items are almost universally located at the extreme rear perimeter of the store.
If you ask a store manager, they'll usually give you a logistical excuse, right? They'll say the refrigerators need to be near the loading docks in the back to keep the cold chain intact.
That is a convenient logistical truth, sure, but it masks the primary psychological intent, which is forced navigation. By placing the most sought-after essentials as far from the entrance and exit doors as physically possible, the supermarket forces you to traverse a labyrinth of aisles.
You have to walk past everything else.
You have to walk past thousands of highly engineered, visually stimulating, ultra-processed products just to get your basic carton of eggs. Every single aisle you pass is an opportunity for an impulse buy. They are trying to maximize the number of distinct product facings your eyes wash over, increasing the statistical probability that your willpower will eventually snap.
It is a gauntlet.
Yeah.
You're running a gauntlet of temptation just to buy breakfast. I kind of liken the modern supermarket to a Las Vegas casino.
That's a really good comparison.
Think about the similarities.
Yeah.
There are rarely any visible clocks anywhere on the walls. The lighting is completely artificial to detach your circadian rhythm from the actual time of day. And the floor plan is literally a maze designed so you cannot quickly exit without spending more money than you intended when you walk through the doors.
The casino analogy is incredibly apt, especially when you start looking at the subtle atmospherics of the store. Every sensory input is tuned to influence behavior. Have you noticed, for instance, how the physical size of shopping carts has steadily grown larger over the last few decades?
They are massive now. Some of them feel like you are pushing a small SUV down the aisle.
That is a very deliberate psychological manipulation. When you put your basic intended list of groceries into an enormous cavernous cart, your haul looks meager. It looks pitifully empty.
Oh, interesting.
Subconsciously, an empty-looking cart triggers a feeling of lack or scarcity, which subtly invites the shopper to add more products just to fill the physical space and feel a sense of abundance.
What about the temperature? Because I always find myself shivering in the grocery store, even in the middle of summer.
Supermarkets deliberately keep ambient temperatures slightly colder than comfortable room temperature. Physiologically, exposure to cold environments stimulates human appetite. The body wants to burn calories to generate heat.
So they're artificially making you hungry.
They want you feeling a subtle baseline level of hunger while you are surrounded by 40,000 edible items. Furthermore, pay attention to the music played over the PA system. It is generally set to a slow tempo, often slightly slower than a normal resting human heartbeat.
No way.
Yes. Behavioral studies show that slow music unconsciously reduces the physical walking pace of shoppers. It slows you down, keeping you in the store for more minutes, which directly correlates to an increase in total spending.
And the lighting.
Yes, the lighting is highly localized, intensely engineered, and far from uniform. The produce section utilizes specialized lighting with specific color temperatures to make the green vegetables look impossibly vibrant and the tomatoes look a deep, rich red.
It makes them pop.
Move over to the meat counter, and you'll find lighting specifically calibrated with red hues to emphasize the freshness of the beef and hide any oxidation. Every zone is optimized to make the biological product look incredibly appealing.
And while the store is manipulating the environment, the products themselves are conducting their own psychological warfare right there on the shelf through packaging. The text goes into detail about the psychology of color.
Packaging design is a multi-million-dollar behavioral science unto itself. Teams of designers spend months testing colors, fonts, and imagery to generate specific, rapid, subconscious associations in the shopper's mind.
Give me an example.
If a cereal box is predominantly green, your brain immediately reflexively associates it with nature, health, and freshness, even if the box is filled with refined carbohydrates and sugar.
Right.
Gold accents evoke a premium, high-quality artisanal experience. Red is used extensively, think of massive fast food chains or popular soda brands, because red creates a subconscious sense of urgency and has been empirically shown to actively stimulate human appetite.
And you will constantly see imagery of rustic, 19th century farms, wooden baskets, or smiling, sun-drenched farmers to evoke a wholesome, traditional feeling for a Group 4 product that was actually extruded through a metal tube in a highly mechanized industrial factory.
It is a complete illusion. Which brings us to the final and arguably most dangerous trap in the entire supermarket casino, the checkout aisle.
The checkout. is the ultimate perfected impulse buy zone. Think about your cognitive state when you finally reach the register.
You're exhausted.
You have navigated the maze, you have made hundreds of micro decisions about price, value, and health. Your decision-making fatigue is peaking, and your willpower is deeply depleted. You are standing completely still, waiting in line, and you are probably mildly hungry from the cold air. Your psychological guard is entirely down.
And what do they strategically place right there? Exactly 30 centimeters from your dominant hand.
Highly palatable, high-profit margin items. Candy bars, chewing gum, mints, cold sodas. You don't have to walk down an aisle to get them. You don't even have to stretch your arm. The temptation is immediate, effortless, and requires zero friction.
A vastly disproportionate amount of a supermarket's unplanned pure profit revenue comes entirely from the checkout zone, capturing shoppers at their absolute weakest moment.
And even before we get to the checkout, we have to navigate the gauntlet of promotions. Because the food industry knows exactly how to trigger our irrational economic lizard brains, too. Let's talk about the health halo and the illusion of value.
The health halo is a fascinating, highly documented psychological phenomenon in consumer research. It occurs when a highly processed Group 4 product features a prominent, legally permissible, but completely misleading positive health claim on the front of the package. Things like low-fat, gluten-free, source of essential vitamins, or high protein.
So you are looking at a box of sugary cookies, but it has a big green banner that says low fat, and your brain immediately shortcuts to, oh, these are healthy cookies.
Exactly. And the behavioral result of that cognitive shortcut is entirely counterintuitive and biologically disastrous. Studies have consistently shown that when consumers see these positive labels, they drastically underestimate the total caloric content of the product.
It justifies eating more.
Because they perceive the item as healthier or safer, they give themselves subconscious moral permission to eat much more of it. In clinical experiments, people consumed up to 35% more of a snack when it was labeled low fat compared to when they were given the exact same snack without the label.
That is wild. The health claim doesn't actually help them eat better. It actively increases their total consumption of junk. The label is a weapon. And what about pricing promotions? The classic buy two, get one free, or the massive family saver pack end cap displays.
These pricing promotions are incredibly effective because they exploit a deep-seated cognitive bias known as loss aversion. When you see a 3-for-2 deal on bags of chips, your rational brain rarely stops to ask, do I actually need 3 large bags of chips for my household this week?
Right, you just think about the deal.
Instead, your brain thinks, if I do not buy 3 bags right now, I am actively losing money. I am missing out on a rare economic advantage. It creates a false sense of temporal scarcity.
But the real danger isn't just that the supermarket tricked you into spending $3 extra, is it?
No, the financial hit is negligible. The real danger is behavioral. These promotions dramatically increase the sheer volume of ultra-processed stock you bring into your home environment, pushing it far above what you would normally intend to buy.
And that changes how you eat.
And behavioral science shows us a very clear, unbroken rule regarding home environments. The total amount of a product stocked in your house directly linearly predicts your rate of consumption.
If the food is there in the pantry, you will eat it.
Precisely. If you buy 3 bags of cookies because they were on sale, you do not magically pace yourself and eat them at the same slow rate you would have eaten 1 bag over 3 weeks.
No, you plow through them.
Having 3 bags highly visible and immediately accessible in your kitchen leads to eating cookies much more frequently and in much larger quantities. The promotion increased your household stock, and your increased stock accelerated your consumption. The house always wins.
Okay, wow. Let's take a breath here. Because if I am the listener right now absorbing all of this, I might be feeling profoundly overwhelmed, maybe even a little defeated.
I completely understand that.
I mean, we have just laid out a landscape where we are up against military-grade psychophysicists, scientists explicitly engineering oral melt to bypass our evolutionary hormones, corporate executives exploiting our dopamine reward circuits, and supermarkets designed by architects to drain our wallets and expand our waistlines while blasting us with psychological color cues.
It's a lot.
With all this massive, well-funded machinery stacked against us, how are we supposed to feel anything but hopeless? How does an individual person ever win against a system like that?
And that feeling of overwhelm brings us perfectly to the core, culminating message of the source text, and really the most important takeaway of this entire deep dive.
I'll hear it.
The text drives toward a powerful, deeply liberating conclusion. When you step back and truly understand the sheer scale, the money, and the sophisticated scientific engineering of this environment, you have to accept a fundamental, undeniable truth. The problem is not you.
Let me just say that again, directly to the listener, because it needs to be heard. The problem is not you. You are not broken.
If you buy more than you planned at the grocery store, you aren't a weak, uniquely impulsive person. You just walk through an architectural environment that was rigorously designed over decades by brilliant people to make you do exactly that.
Right.
If you finish the entire bag of potato chips on the couch, your moral willpower didn't fail. $1 million, highly calibrated laboratory experiment conducted by food technologists succeeded perfectly.
The internal dialogue we have around food and weight in our culture is so deeply toxic. We say to ourselves, I lack the discipline to not eat this junk.
And the text makes such a profound point about where that specific thought pattern leads.
It leads to a dark place.
When you blame yourself, it leads straight to chronic guilt. Guilt makes you feel terrible, which leads to rigid restriction. You say, I am never eating carbs again, I'm going on a strict diet. And severe restriction inevitably leads right back to massive binging when the limited reserve of willpower inevitably runs out. It is an endless, miserable cycle of shame. But there is an alternative path. The alternative is shifting your internal monologue from, I am weak and flawed, to, I understand exactly how the system is designed, I see the machinery, and therefore I can make informed strategic decisions to navigate it.
That's huge.
That cognitive shift in perspective is the critical difference between living in chronic guilt and operating with true agency.
Agency, the ability to act intentionally rather than just reacting blindly.
Exactly. Now, we have to ground this in reality. The text we are studying is very pragmatic. It acknowledges that you and I do not live in controlled clinical metabolic wards at the NIH.
None for you.
We are not going to magically, perfectly eliminate every single ultra-processed food from our lives forever. We have kids, we have stressful jobs, we have busy lives, and we aren't going to be able to completely avoid modern supermarkets. We live in a complicated, messy, real world.
We are still going to be exhausted. On a Tuesday night, we're going to want a quick snack, and we are going to reach for the chips.
Yes. But understanding the mechanisms, understanding Howard Moskowitz's bliss point, understanding the corporate obsession with craveability and more-ishness, understanding how oral melt hacks your 15-minute hormonal delay, recognizing the no-VA classifications, and spotting the supermarket's end cap traps, that knowledge is the very first necessary step to no longer being an unconscious victim of those systems.
Right.
When you know how the magic trick works, it loses its power to deceive you. Awareness inherently alters behavior.
I used to use the analogy that it's like turning on the lights in a haunted house, but honestly, it's more like learning the tells of a professional poker player.
Oh, I like that.
Before you know the tells, you think they're just lucky and you constantly get bluffed out of your money. You feel like a bad player. But when someone points out, hey, every time he has a weak hand, he touches his watch, suddenly the game changes. You can still play the game, you're still at the table, but you can't be bluffed anymore. You see the truth.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You can still choose to eat the potato chips if you really want them, but it becomes an active, informed choice. You pour a portion into a bowl, knowing exactly what the food is designed to do, rather than falling into a compulsive, confusing behavior that leaves you staring at an empty bag feeling ashamed.
So let's do a quick, energetic recap of the deep dive today to lock all of this valuable intel in. We started in the 1970s with Howard Moskowitz taking military psychophysics and discovering the bliss point, effectively turning food into a highly tuned dopamine delivery system.
We learned the terrifying corporate vocabulary uncovered by Michael Moss's research, the engineering of craveability, the elimination of friction for snackability, and the insidious, hunger-generating nature of moorishness.
We explored the biological hijacking of ultra-processed foods, specifically how the total lack of fiber spikes our blood sugar, how complex flavors bypass sensory-specific satiety, and how the engineering of oral melt allows these products to sprint past our natural 15-minute hormonal satiety delay.
We demystified Carlos Montero's Novia classification, proving that the true danger lies in the Industrial Processing Group 4 laboratory formulations, not just the simple macronutrients.
We looked at Kevin Hall's definitive 2019 NIH clinical trial that proved, mathematically and unequivocally, that ultra-processed foods cause us to unconsciously overeat by 500 calories a day, destroying the old "a calorie is a calorie" myth.
And finally, we mapped the psychological battlefield of the supermarket, From the slotting fees that put sugar at a child's eye level to the health halo that tricks us into eating 35% more, right down to the willpower draining checkout trap.
It has been a wild ride.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, building on the trajectory of everything we've discussed today.
Okay, lay it on us.
We just spent an hour talking about how multinational food companies were able to perfectly engineer our overeating in the 70s, 80s, and 90s using relatively basic trial and error, focus groups, and combinations of sugar, salt, and fat.
Yeah, that was 50 years ago. That was basically analog engineering.
Right. So ask yourself this. What is going to happen in the very near future when these exact same massive corporations start fully integrating advanced artificial intelligence into their product development?
Oh boy.
What happens when they move beyond focus groups and start analyzing our massive data sets of personal biometric data? Imagine algorithms analyzing your smartwatch health metrics, your real-time glucose monitor spikes, and your exact online grocery purchasing habits to create hyper-custom tailored bliss points optimized not just for a general demographic, but for specific households or even individual biological profiles.
That is terrifying.
The battlefield of the supermarket and the molecular engineering of our food is about to get hyper-personalized on a level that Howard Moskowitz could never have dreamed of in his laboratory.
Well, that is certainly a terrifying thought, and it's definitely going to keep me up at night. But it also reinforces exactly why this knowledge, this X-ray vision, is so incredibly vital right now. We have to be aware of the game being played. So, listener, next time you walk through those automatic sliding doors into the grocery store, I want you to take this knowledge with you. Look at the end caps with a critical eye. Look at the eye-level shelves and see who paid to be there. Turn the package around and read the ingredients for those Group 4 chemical formulations. And remember, above all else, the system is engineered, but you hold the power of choice. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered. Until next deep dive.